And welcome back to this Thursday edition of Newsmax Now.
As we get started with this third hour of Newsmax Now here on Newsmax TV, talking about the GOP presidential field continuing to grow. A new entrant into that race today, former New York Governor George Pataki, made it official during a visit to New Hampshire.
It is to preserve and protect that freedom for future generations that I speak. It is to preserve and protect that freedom that this morning I announce I am a candidate for the Republican nomination for President of the United States.
There you have it. Pataki told supporters that an intrusive government is jeopardizing our freedoms.
And he joins another Republican who jumped into the race yesterday during a visit to Western Pennsylvania.
To announce that I am running for President of the United States.
And that is former Pennsylvania Senator's second run. Rick Santorum right there trying to make a go for the president once again.
And a warning again today for the Houston area and Texas. More flooding is expected. The San Jacinto River could be about 3 feet above the flood stage, sending more water into the Houston suburbs. At least 6 people in and around that city have died caused by these rain and floods. Also, people in central Texas have been badly hit.
We are still in search and rescue mode. We are still looking for viable victims.
11 people remain missing after the Blanco River surged through the tourist town of Wimberley.
Oklahoma has also been swamped, and Lake Texamo, a bridge that was rebuilt following a flood back in 2007, has been covered again by water. Large parts of the state are under a flash flood watch. As you can see, in all, between Texas and Oklahoma, at least 19 people have died. FIFA's president, Sepp Blatter, is speaking out today. He says these are very difficult times for the governing body of international soccer.
Actions of individuals, if proven, bring shame and humiliation on football and demand action and change from us all.
Blatter's remarks come after several high-ranking FIFA officials were arrested for corruption, but the 79-year-old did not address questions about a possible resignation.
In Washington, D.C., security improvements are now underway at the White House, specifically right outside the White House gate. You can see staff members right here. They're measuring and adding those iron spikes we've talked about, some upgrades for security here. The improvements come after a series of embarrassing security breaches, including one guy who jumped all the way over the fence and ran inside the White House.
Now over to California. Officials have closed off some 7 miles of the coastline along Los Angeles. This after balls of tar started washing ashore.
Can this be connected to the Santa Barbara oil spill? And my answer is I just don't know yet. It's too early to tell, and obviously that's a concern that we have and something that we're following up on.
Well, what officials are telling is they're telling people to avoid any contact with the water, wet sand, or anything else that might have washed up along those beaches.
The Pentagon confirms today that live anthrax was inadvertently sent to labs in 9 U.S. states and an air base in South Korea. The shipments were all from a military lab in Utah, where anthrax was supposed to be irradiated or basically left inactive so that the labs could do research, but it was still active. Officials say there's no threat to the public, though, and more than 24 people are currently being treated for exposure as a precaution.
Illegal immigrants crossing the border is at a 20-year low, according to the Pew Research Center. The population of illegal immigrants in the U.S. tripled between 1990 and 2007 to over 12 million. Now, that number has since dropped by about 1 million. DHS Secretary Jay Johnson says the massive investment in border security has contributed to the decline. The Justice Department charges 15 Chinese nationals with fraud for their involvement in an SAT scam. The DOJ says the 15 Chinese people used fake passports to pose as high school students to take college aptitude exams like the SAT. The federal grand jury says the imposters used counterfeit passports to fake test proctors into believing that they were the actual students that were supposed to take the exam.
And Iran's foreign minister says a nuclear deal could happen as soon as June 30th. That's the deadline, as long as the U.S. doesn't try anything to make any changes.
If people insist on excessive demands, on renegotiations, then it would be difficult to envisage an agreement even without a deadline.
This comes as the U.S. and Iran continue to try and hammer out the final details of that deal to monitor Iran's nuclear program. And tech giant Yahoo may soon face a huge class action lawsuit over privacy concerns. The company is accused of reading subscribers' emails to boost advertising revenue. Last year, 80% of its profit came from search and display ads. This comes as a California judge rules that email users who sent or received messages from 2011 until today could sue a group. Officials estimate that group could include some 1 million people.
2 former cast members on Saturday Night Live are getting their very own action figures, but they won't be around for too long, so hurry up. According to the Entertainment Weekly, Tina Fey and Amy Poehler will be shrunk down to 4-inch figurines. The pair will be clad in painted-on pantsuits with shellacked hair. This is a limited edition run for San Diego's Comic-Con, and if there are any left over, well, they'll go for sale online.
Well, first, Elizabeth
J.D.
Warren,
Hayworth, everyone.
First, she tried to claim that she was Native American because of high cheekbones to get a special Harvard Law faculty position. Now we're finding out that she and her husband were flipping foreclosed homes, but that's okay. She's a leftist. She always cares.
Everybody was doing it back then.
Everybody was
Everybody.
Kidding. Let's talk about the other side of the presidential field. Getting bigger, expanding. Rick Santorum launching his 2016 presidential bid. He had this to say about his competitor, Senator Rand Paul's claim that ISIS has come into being because of hawks in the GOP.
I would expect to hear that from maybe Bernie Sanders. I don't expect to hear that from someone running for the Republican nomination. I think that is just fundamentally a misunderstanding of the nature of the enemy we face.
Rand Paul going too far with his
Well, we
statement?
predicted this yesterday.
Yeah.
We sat out here and talked about the fact that it departs so far from GOP orthodoxy. Even if you're disappointed in the Iraqis, to somehow claim that Republicans had anything to do with creating ISIS, it ain't going to play. And what was really, not to get too inside baseball, but to whom did Rick Santorum grant that interview?
George Stephanopoulos.
Yes, George Stephanopoulos. Now, in terms of early campaign exposure under what would typically be a hostile situation, he actually threw a bone to Stephanopoulos, guaranteeing prominence last night on ABC and again this morning on Good Morning America. So in terms of making a splash with an announcement, Santorum, by allowing Stephanopoulos a little bit back on the rehab trail, that was a pretty smart move.
I think it was very savvy. And, you know, you look at the 2012 Rick Santorum campaign, he should not be discounted as a candidate. He won the Iowa caucuses. He almost won Romney's sort of home state, Michigan, in the primary there, which would have thrown things in complete disarray.
Well, he's used to that, right? Being underestimated.
Well, yeah, he was never favored to win any race in which he was involved, starting with the House of Representatives to the U.S. Senate seat he took away from, I believe it was Harris Wofford of Pennsylvania.
Wow.
The reason I can remember, it's 1994. I know you kids were still in school, but hey, I was that was the year I was elected to the House. Ricky's a good guy. And the challenge for former Senator Santorum is the fact that so many folks kind of fill the bill of social conservatism. Mike Huckabee is back in it, and Ben Carson is in it. And so you've got that going, and just wonder if Santorum can repeat what he was able to do in 2012. I think it's going to be an uphill battle.
What about Pataki?
George obviously has the good sense to come be with us on Newsmax TV quite a bit. Talk about a guy who's been underestimated. I mean, in '94, you saw a situation where Governor Cuomo was so much the odds-on favorite, but the national wave caught Pataki, got elected, had 2 very successful terms.
But a lot of people think he doesn't have a chance.
Well, it's going to be tough. He's playing New Hampshire, and it was good to see him in a blue suit because he almost becomes the man in the gray flannel suit. He's a steady guy. He's a dependable guy. But I think even George would admit maybe he's not a flashy, charismatic kind of guy. So that could be a challenge for him, but he's a great guy, and we'll see what happens.
What do you have coming up tonight on Newsmax Prime?
Oh, we've got plenty tonight. General Michael Hayden, former director of the CIA and the NSA, will join us. Another former CIA official said, hey, ISIS could win this thing.